Hello once again, everybody, and thank you for joining me here on this special edition of Bang the Book Radio. We're going to talk about UFC on ESPN2 in Philadelphia with Christian Pina of the Sports Gambling Podcast. Over at bangthebook.com, lots of great stuff going on right now. My MLB daily picks and tips piece, the Bettors Box on Monday and Thursday. Recorded an episode of Bang the Book Radio today with Kyle Hunter about NIT, CBI, CIT, Sweet 16, Elite 8, all college basketball there today. Head on over to the website, check out his daily picks article, as well as Parker Michaels' daily NHL picks article, and Christian Pina's breakdown of UFC on ESPN2. Christian, how's it going today, man?
We are going out with a bang, my friend. We have had, 13 straight events here in this UFC Philly card. UFC gave the fans what they want, which is blood and violence in Philadelphia. This card is very, very casual, fan-friendly to the point of literally 3 fight of the year contenders on this fight, which should not see the scorecard standing and banging until one person goes down. So we're going out with a bang before a week break on the UFC front here, man. I can't wait.
So just to sort of cycle back to one of the talking points we've had before, you've mentioned a lot of cards that recently haven't been good for the casual fight fan. This one is. So do you find greater edges from a betting standpoint with these, well-known fight cards, or are these a little bit tougher for you?
Truthfully, I wouldn't say it's tougher or it's easier. It's just different. And again, I'm more of what translates to the less variance is being an over 2.5 rounds type of better, finding the least path, the paths of least resistance. Because again, when you have 2 guys standing there, it takes variance for a stoppage to occur. Same things with unders, same things with that. That's why I tend to lean towards that style. It's just eliminating types of variance. With this one, this card is built on variance. In every situation in every fight you see when it's 2 knockout artists like this, there is, again, when we talk philosophically, you should probably shade bets towards the underdogs, just because a lot of these are coin flips. And if you're getting plus money on coin flips, it makes a lot of sense. But there are some of these, the classic ones on this card as well. I mean, the Watterson-Carolina fight over 2.5 sitting at -425, Pearson Green -335, Kenney and Borg -260 to the over 2.5, Moraes and Mizzou at -400. So, and even Barboza and Aguilar over 2.5 -340. That being said, it's impossible to stack top to bottom undercard prelim all the way to main event with just knockout fights. People would die and people would be going out on stretchers. You need time to catch your breath, use the bathroom, that type of stuff. So there is, those type of what in theory looks to be those type of less variance over type fights. But there are so many more than normal on this card. So it's just different for me when you talk about just high variance fights like this.
Now, you mentioned in the open, you think that there are 3 potential fight of the year candidates here on this UFC on ESPN2 card, or ESPN, whatever the hell it is. It is UFC on ESPN2, but ESPN2 is its own network with whatever. All right, in any event, the main event is one of those fights that you think has significant potential here.
Yeah, Gaethje and Barboza. I mean, this is outside of Dustin Poirier, this is who's the most violent man in the UFC. I mean, Barboza is looked at as one of the best knockout artists of all time and has 4 less knockouts than Justin Gaethje with 16. Look, Gaethje has the style of kill or be killed. He has said basically, if we fight 100 times, I'm going to take Barboza's soul 80, and he's going to rip my throat out 20. And that is Gaethje goes in there and he has endeared himself to fans because he is going to kill for you, or he's going to be killed. And going out on your sword is something you can't ask for more out of a person you're going to place your bet on. We've seen Gaethje struggle. We've seen him get knocked out viciously in what most people would consider maybe life-changing knockouts in some part. And Gaethje comes back and knocks out James Vick, gets back on the horse. This to me is, look, Barboza, when you break this down, Barboza is definitely the more well-rounded technical mixed martial artist in just about every area. That being said, Gaethje has the deceptive power that can put anyone down. And when you look at this stylistically, Not that Barboza, one of the most prolific knockout artists of all time. So it's not as if he wants to employ a point fighting. He's just a little bit what I would call smarter about how he goes about it. Gaethje is wild. He swings from the heavens and all that type of stuff. So while I think that Barboza in the first round is likely to have success, use his speed, use his, some of the most dangerous kicks in the UFC, I think he's very likely to even win the first round. I think in rounds 2, 3, all the way through, that's where Gaethje is going to be able to turn this on, because traditionally, when you look at Barboza and the type of people he has struggled with, it is pressure, pressure, pressure. And that is 1A, A1, the name of Gaethje's game. I do not see this going close to the scorecards. I think it may be a little bit later than people think. I don't think this would be a first round knockout for either guy, but rounds 2, 3, potentially 4. Eventually, I favor the underdog here, and I see Justin Gaethje knocking him out along the way.
So what do you make of Gaethje here, in the sense that he's only 2-2 in the UFC, has fought some very good competition though, but again, just a 500 record here after really pummeling a lot of guys in some of the lesser promotions. So what does that mean to you, that, he's had 4 fights, he's lost 2, he's won 2, all of them knockout one way or another? I mean, is he ready for a guy like Barboza that has this type of history?
When you go kill or be killed, you're going to get killed sometimes. And he's been killed as much as he's killed. And I completely understand what you're saying. I personally think he's where most people can look at that and say he's a 500 fighter. There's different types of 500 fighters in this. David Branch is a 500 fighter. He's not the same type of 500 fighter. There's a bunch of them out there. Gaethje, to me, is not that. And he is getting what I would say better if he can, he is a D1 wrestler. He has never shot a takedown in the UFC. I think you might see that for the first time in his career here. He just he's fallen in love with his striking. He cannot keep this pace up for his career, I don't think. But I think he's one of the most exciting guys on the roster. And in a fight that I see as 50-50, I am more than happy to take the underdog price here. I mean, it's, would I like him to be 4-0 with 4 first-round knockouts? Well, you saw that with a guy like Francis Ngannou and eventually ran into something else. So the record to me isn't as important as, what you can take away from that, what he's learning from that. We see this time and time again. So the 2-2 record to me for a guy coming into the promotion with all the success he had before that, I don't put a lot of stock in it. I understand that is his style, and that's going to happen, and it's going to happen a lot. But to me, this is just somebody who I think is, on the way up. Not that Barboza is certainly on the way down. It's just, I think that the style of pressure, I would largely throw the 2-2 out. I just think that pressure-wise, some guys handle it and they counterpunch. Barboza has not been equipped to handle pressure-type fighters.
And sometimes we look at these UFC cards and the way that they're structured, and, sometimes before the main event, you'll have something kind of boring, like to draw a food analogy, something like a salad, or a soup of the day. Seems like we got some hot wings as an appetizer here for this middleweight fight between David Branch and Jack Hermansson. Should be some good action in this one too.
Changing of the guard fight, it really could be. Look, David Branch is one of those type of fighters that to me is kind of blowing smoke with a lot of things that he says. I think he's here for the paycheck to get as much money out of the sport as he can. And don't get me wrong, at 37, Branch has kind of done it all. Here's my issue, and it's a big one. David Branch has shown quit and a lot of it, and that shows you where he is at his career. Taking the, against Luke Rockhold, tapping out to strikes. That is something that is something, when it comes to the underground thoughts of MMA, is something you don't do. You go out on your sword, you get knocked out, fine. He did not want to do that, and I understand living to fight another day. Why take unnecessary damage? He was going to get knocked out anyway. I completely understand that thought process. He didn't even try to kind of do anything there. And sometimes when you're beat and you're at this stage of your career and you're here for money or you're here for other reasons other than love of the sport, that's an issue. Jack Hermansson here is looking for the biggest win of his career at 30 years old and is an absolute killer. Here's the thing. Hermansson, when he gets on top of somebody, they don't get back up. Ground and pounds, submissions, you name it, 11 knockouts, 4 submissions. This, to me, is the worst possible matchup for David Branch. I think the UFC knew what they were doing here. Branch is probably more than likely to, or more than happy to take this paycheck and get out of town with another loss, while elevating a guy like Jack Hermansson to see, his biggest win of his co-main event career. He has paid his dues. He has been all over the world fighting everyone that the UFC has asked to put on, exciting type of fights. And I just see this one as one guy is there for the love, is there for being hungry right now, trying to make his first real career run, while one guy has one foot out the door and is here to make as much money before they leave the sport to set up their future. And that is not a good recipe for a guy like David Branch, and a great recipe for the style of Jack Hermansson. Because again, Branch has shown he will quit. Jack Hermansson has shown that when he gets on top of you, people are they are finished, for lack of a better term.
Well, and as we look at Branch here, as you mentioned, a guy a little bit long in the tooth, but coming off of that loss to Rockhold, where, as you mentioned, did, seem to show a certain level of quit there, does bounce back really nicely with a first-round knockout over Thiago Santos, then loses in the second round in his next fight. Do you see that bounce back potential here in this one for him?
That's what I'm talking about. He's a 500 fighter, right? And so it's different than a guy like Gaethje, who's a 500 fighter. Records are the same in theory at 500, but it's a different style. Look, you can never count out Branch. I mean, that's for sure. I just don't think he's in this. When I'm going to handicap a fight, and I'm going to put money behind someone, I need to know that they are all in. And I have very serious doubts that David Branch is all in at this point. You got to remember that Thiago Santos fight was before Santos moved, that was a bunch of things. And at that point, Santos was known for being a little killer be killed too. Vicious power, some of the best power in the division at the time. But he had been knocked out just as many times as well. And so I think that was more an indictment of Santos than a show of good faith toward David Branch here. So while he's obviously alternated wins and losses, I think he potentially even leaves the UFC one fight under 500 while Jack Hermansson gets elevated.
So let me ask you real quickly about this, because people like to talk about common opponents in other sports. And obviously there's a lot of nuance when it comes to
talk
UFC.
To me about MMA math. I love it.
Well, I mean, obviously there's a lot of nuance to, UFC and MMA in general. Santos loses to Branch, beats Hermanson just a few months before that. What does that mean to you when you've got common opponents so close together? One guy wins, one guy loses. Do you factor that into the handicap at all?
No. MMA math is the most overrated type of situation, an overrated thing people can point to common opponents wise. I mean, there's memes and stuff out there that basically show, Paul Craig is the best fighter of all time, because as you break it all the way down, give me a fighter right now that's at the top, give me at the top of, a well-known fighter right now, and give me two of them actually. And I'll show you how, give me one that's really bad and one that's really good. And I can bet you that I could get make the opinion opposite for you.
Oh man. I mean, I guess I'd say somebody like, a Donald Cerrone and, whoever else you want to throw out to make this argument.
All right, so we'll say Donald Cerrone, and we'll say, let's go with Paul Craig, who is sometimes been the laughingstock of the Paul Craig. Basically, you can go through this. There's this website called MMAmath.com, and you can put in two fighters, and it says fighter A can be, and you put in fighter B, and then you say prove it, and you can go through. MMA math is the literal worst type of situation in the world, because stylistically everybody is different, and it's not even close. Just because somebody has a little bit worse of a chin, but their submission game is on point, it doesn't really work like that in this sport. Let's do Donald Cerrone can beat Khabib. Let's see if we could prove that one. No, that one can't be proven, but if you want to go have some fun out there, look at some awful fighters, and it will tell you how, in theory, that fighter is better than some of the elite in the world. It's absolutely crazy. I do not believe in MMA math whatsoever. I just really don't.
All right, fair enough. I was just curious, because that's always something that kind of stands out, especially with these guys, being in the same division. So they do sometimes run into the same opponent, and you can have some very different results there. So good to hear, an angle on that. The same opponent thing, it's just one of those things that probably people do put too much stock in, and certainly that's something that people put too much stock in all the other sports as well. All right, as we bounce around the rest of this main card here, Christian, what else do you like? What else are you looking at?
When we look down at this, Josh Emmett, coming off a life-changing knockout against Michael Johnson, who just cannot be trusted. That one's a pick. I don't think there's a ton to like there. As far as we look at underdogs here, Michelle Waterson at plus 130. This is going to be she has never looked better in her career by a long shot. And this one is a very likely to be a decision straw white type of women's fight. And I think if you can get that at a plus 130 coin flip, certainly makes some sense as well. As we go down, I think that the fight that we would be very much remiss in not talking about is the other fight of the year candidate here with Sheymon Moraes and Sodiq Yusuff. Look, this is, I think this one could be just as, if not more entertaining than the main event. I really, really do. Look, Moraes a little bit employs, let's say cat and mouse, but he sets up his strikes beautifully. He almost lulls, I want to say lull you to sleep because it's still exciting. He uses his jab. He is still very in your face and violent, but he throws things that you do not see coming. And when I say things, the way that he uses his Muay Thai elbows, he is out for blood. His elbow game is just as good, if not, no, I would say better. It's just as good as a guy like John Jones. When you look at Yusuff has been dubbed the Nigerian Conor McGregor for a while here. He has the whole package. And when we look at this kind of upbringing of Nigerian prospects, there's a real thought amongst MMA communities that is the new kind of breeding ground. It used to be Russia. Francis Ngannou came up and kind of broke the mold with just how physically gifted he was. And when you can have guys that are like that, I mean, look at a Kamaru Usman, right? It's absolutely incredible what the Nigerian prospects have been able to do. So this one is such an exciting matchup here. Again, lean towards the underdog. I think the under makes some sense. Both guys in the distance, all that type of stuff. This one could be fight of the year a candidate. It really could be. When we look at the rest of them, just at rapid fire, I think that's really the only one that stuck out to me. And one more underdog I did want to talk about: Gaethje Kenney plus 240, Ray Borg minus 290. Gaethje Kenney is the first double champ, 2-weight class champ in LFA, which is a little bit below, a Bellator, a UFC minor league type of situation here. Going up against Ray Borg at minus 290. Again, it's a tough ask on short notice for a guy like Kenney, but if anybody can do it in the ultimate letdown spot for Ray Borg, it's him. And at this price at plus 240, look, I have long believed if you lose a title fight, and this has been very profitable throughout my UFC betting career, you need to look to bet against that person next. And when you look at the reasons why philosophically, it makes sense, right? You just had your dream ripped from you. And so how do you get up to face a UFC newcomer on short notice? Not to mention Ray Borg's son has had multiple surgeries since then. He had the dolly thrown at him, had glass in his eye. There's just a lot going on with Ray Borg. And while I'm sure he's thrilled to be back in the octagon, missed weight, as we talked about off air, there's a lot going on here. And there is a ton of value on a guy who has more than a puncher's chance to do this against a guy like Ray Borg at plus 240. So Gaethje Kenney at plus 240 makes a lot of sense as well.
Well, and I think something here, too, that, Kenney gets the assignment, I believe, on March 25th. So earlier on in the week, but I'm sure he was preparing for something, in LFA. It's not like this guy was just sitting around stuffing his face with Cheetos watching TV, So, I mean, he's ready to go. No matter who the fighter is, he's ready to go. And if you're somebody like Borg, you're expecting one thing, you've planned for one thing, now you're getting another thing.
And you're already on the ultimate letdown spot off a title fight.
Right. And I think that's one of the hardest things is that, if you're somebody like Gaethje Kenney, you're almost jumping in there with house money saying, you know what? I don't know how many people expect me to win. I expect to win. But for Ray Borg, I mean, you've got to bounce back. And that's a really tough spot to do that, as you mentioned. So I think it's a really good angle. And I mean, I guess it kind of speaks to, there are a lot of situational spot elements to UFC for sure.
Completely. And this is one that I think makes a lot of sense. And again, there's so many factors going up against Ray Borg. Look, is Ray Borg, he's the number 3 in the world in this division. So in theory here, do I think that he probably will win? Yeah. Do I think that it's indicative of the odds? This is the definition of value. This is the definition of a long play of, mine personally, kind of fading guys off of title fight losses. It's been very profitable. This is, something of a perfect storm. And not in a good way for Ray Borg. Now, look, Ray Borg is much more evolved as a fighter than a guy, than Gaethje Kenney. So from that, I understand he's the transition king. But look, Kenney has been a killer. You don't become a 2 division champion in any promotion without being a killer. And so disrespectful is probably the wrong word at plus 240, but there is so much value on that underdog. Again, would I be shocked if it lost at plus 240? Absolutely not. But it will, if they fought 100 times, it's going to win a lot more than those true odds indicate.
Last question I'll ask you about this Borg fight, because it is fascinating. It certainly is one that's given us a lot to talk about. He hasn't fought in a year and a half and then missed weight. Does that say anything to you?
Well, look, we've talked about this at length. There's different versions of missing weight. Some guys just don't want to deplete themselves. They'll take their 20% purse forfeit, hopefully make it up in their win bonus, and go from there. Again, to me, specifically talking about Ray Borg's missing weight situation, that to me speaks to all the outside issues going on in his life. Again, had to have eye surgery. His child has been in the hospital for the better part of 2 years while he's been out with injury. So to me, it just goes to show you maybe, this is, I don't want to say, because again, Ray Borg is the consummate professional. But I just think that sometimes in life, you need to take a little bit more time off, that even though this is an 8-month layoff for him, maybe he needed more time. Maybe things aren't going perfectly for him. And again, getting down to this weight after the 8-month layoff, maybe put on more weight. So maybe he is the bigger guy. Maybe he's a little bit more fresh. But to me, this may be an independent type of situation, maybe than just saying wasn't trying to make weight, wants to be the bigger guy to have the size advantage. So to me, it's a big red flag, another red flag amongst others.
Christian Pina, who's working, you can find over on the Sports Gambling Podcast. You can also follow him on Twitter at Christian Pina, Pina, and wrote a very good preview for us over at BangTheBook.com. Christian, appreciate it as always, man. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you again here in a couple weeks.
All right. Enjoy the violence this weekend, buddy.